CCP has a 100-year plan, that is, to become the world's leader before 2049. But the United States stands as the biggest obstacle to that goal. Jing says Communist Party head Xi Jinping aims to make sure the regime can become as powerful as the U.S. in this generation, so that by next generation it can surpass and take charge of the United States. Jing compares the U.S. to the most valued employee in a workplace, handsome, capable, and in their prime. In that scenario, the Chinese regime had just been promoted to the number 2 position. Jing says the regime wants to squeeze out the U.S. in order to reach the top, but doesn't dare to start a war. So what's there to do? It has come up with other strategies. Jing says one of the main tactics is to become intertwined with the U.S. economy. That means pumping Chinese investment into the U.S. and controlling its market. He says the more intertwined they become, the harder it is for the U.S. to fight back. But for Beijing, Chinese investment in the U.S. also serves another major purpose, influencing the country's political system. Jing says the Chinese regime strives to make sure every congressional district in the U.S. has Chinese investment backing. That way, the regime can directly influence politicians through gaining control over thousands of votes. He added that actually the House of Representatives can be controlled, and explained some simple math to illustrate his point. The U.S. is home to over 300 million people. In the House, the number of representatives is capped at 435. On average, every congressional district represents about 750,000 people, but only around 30% will vote in elections. So effectively, a little over 200,000 votes decides candidates' fates. Jing says House races are usually quite close. He estimates the gap between each candidate is less than 10,000. In that case, he says if you have thousands of votes on your hands, you are the candidate's dad. Meaning to say anyone who controls that number of votes controls the candidates and the election result. He went on to say that if China does a good job, it can buy the United States and turn the U.S. Congress into the Second People's Congress of China. The National People's Congress is China's top legislature. Jing noted that the regime also has other tricks up its sleeve, aside from manipulating elections, like fostering enemies in America's backyard. He says if the U.S. has 4 major enemies, it would struggle and lose its direction, and that the Chinese regime's strategy is to make sure that the U.S. has plenty of enemies to keep it occupied. He explained the terrorists are currently one. Russia is very similar to one. But it's not enough. China once wanted to prop up Brazil, but points out that Brazil has the potential but isn't fully up to the task either. That's it for Beijing's plans to subvert the U.S. from within. But Jing says the CCP doesn't stop there, that it has even more ideas to weaken America's power from the outside. For this strategy, the main focus is on the Indo-Pacific region. To understand how the Chinese regime's external tactics work, we have to first understand the importance of the Indo-Pacific region. Spanning from America's west coast to western India, the Indo-Pacific is critical to the well-being of the globe. It is home to more than half of the world's population and is responsible for over 60% of global GDP. The world's 3 biggest economies are also involved here: the U.S., China, and Japan. These countries can thrive because the current global order keeps the region free and open. Critical trade routes are secure, so countries can freely move their energy and goods. The U.S. serves as a police force and guards that order. America's position as the global leader manifests in that power. Only the U.S. can project its strength into almost any region of the world. And in the case of the Indo-Pacific, the U.S. can do that largely because of robust alliances and a powerful military. These are Beijing's 2 targets. For the Chinese Communist regime, the South China Sea is a good starting point. This strategic region sits between China, Vietnam, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Beijing's plan is to build and expand artificial islands there, which are turned into military bases. The expanded reach gives China's military more access, designed to help them gradually take control of the area. The South China Sea is shaped like an inverted pyramid, with the Paracel Islands in the west, the Spratlys in the south, and the Scarborough Shoal in the east. Jing's original speech is from 2016, and at the time he said the regime had already taken control of the west and south. China hasn't militarized the Scarborough Shoal in the east, but had already seized the area in 2012. Jing explained that once China completes its control of the East, the South China Sea would become part of the regime's territory. Control in that area would give China the ability to choke out one of the world's most important energy and trade routes at any time. Almost a third of the world's crude oil goes through the South China Sea every year. A third of global shipping also travels through the region. Jing says this could put America's alliance with Asia in danger. That's because trade routes in the South China Sea are the lifeblood for two key U.S. allies, Japan and South Korea. Both countries receive almost 90% of their imported oil through the South China Sea, and 70% of Japan's external trade is also shipped through the area. Jing says if China chokes the lifeline of these two allies, they would probably start doubting the value of forming an alliance with America. For Beijing, gaining control of the South China Sea gives it the ability to kill two birds with one stone. Aside from the alliance, a bigger target is the U.S. military. The U.S. military can project power in the Indian Ocean largely because it maintains a pivot point there. It's a military base called Diego Garcia. It sits near the center of the Indian Ocean and allows the U.S. military to quickly respond to any conflicts in the nearby region. Jing says if the CCP controls the South China Sea, it would be much harder for the Diego Garcia to get supplies from other bases in East Asia. Not only that, Jing adds that the regime is working to either build or control a string of key maritime choke points. It's known as the String of Pearls strategy. In the speech, Jing boasts that if the String of Pearls strategy is successful, seizing the Diego Garcia base would be a piece of cake. If that becomes a reality, the U.S. would lose its control over the Indian Ocean and its influence over the Middle East, effectively bringing its position as global leader to an end. He claims using this method allows the Chinese regime to peacefully rob the U.S.'s seat, even without a fight. As a final note in his speech, Jing noted that the strategies he touched on are secret tricks and instructed the audience to keep the information to themselves. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.